Is GPT-4 the newest version of OpenAI's language model systems worse than the previous versions? And how important is it that we can tell the difference between content written by artificial intelligence versus content written by humans? To answer these questions and more, my guest this week is Aasim Sani, a 2X AI company founder and a Techstars 2018 alum, who's also been featured on Forbes 30 Under 30. Congrats. His next invention, great, is to be a 20 something. And I think that we can all recognize how important that is. I'm excited for this conversation, but first, welcome to this week's episode of Make Sense, a video podcast that simplifies complex issues at the intersection of tech and people. So, whether you're totally hyped on AI and ready for that robot takeover, or you want to crawl into a cave after deleting all of your social media accounts, I'm here with my guests to help make sense of what's going on so you can design yourself into the future. My name is Lindsay. I'm a product market fit strategist, innovation consultant, and venture fundraising advisor. If you are new here, subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So let's make sense of GTP4 and how AI has evolved. Awesome. Welcome. How are you?
Good. Great to be here.
Great. I'm excited to have this conversation. So let's just jump right in with our first segment, Crystal Ball. What does the future hold? This is where I call out interesting predictions that others made for this year, and the experts, my guests, tell us their hot take. So I'm going to rapid fire some headlines. And Awesome, I want you to say, if it's something that you know about, I want you to say, yes, that's happening, or no, that's not happening. If it's something you don't know about, I want you to say, yes, I want that to happen, or no, bad idea. Okay?
Sounds great.
All right, let's start with one I haven't brought up on Make Sense just yet. Nations give animals, trees, and rivers the rights of people. So Zealand granted personhood to a river so it can now sue anyone who pollutes it.
Yay.
You
Big
like
on.
that idea?
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. I think it's a little complicated. I'm not sure what the legality is, but it sounds interesting, right?
If companies can have legal rights like a person in the States,
Rivers and trees and parks should too. That is
yeah.
a great take. I love that. So if corporations can be people, then our rivers, coasts, beaches, coasts, and rivers can be people too. Awesome. All right. Another headline that hasn't yet made it on to Make Sense. We've recorded, this is now our 20th episode. So it's crazy I haven't brought this one up. VCs are betting on India's startup ecosystem and its next period of growth. So, India has stepped into the VC spotlight. It's projected to be the world's third largest economy by 2030, and both domestic VCs there, international VCs here are betting big on India as an emerging market. What do you know?
Yay. For sure. I mean, there, like, everybody I know back home now actually knows that me being a startup founder isn't a path to failure.
That's really great. So that's what everyone had thought when came to college in the U.S. and went into startups.
Yeah, it's like doctor, lawyer, engineer. Now startup founders mildly more acceptable.
Hmm. Okay. Are there any big Indian startups that we would know here in the U.S.
Hmm.
that you know of?
Well, when I think big Indian startups, I think of Swiggy, Flipkart. I think of Zoho. Zoho does actually have some level of following. In the States, it's like a cheap provider for everything you'd want in a Google workspace.
Okay. All right.
Um,
How do you spell that one?
Zoho.
Oh,
They're
you know what? I've been using Zoho surveys tool for since like 2016. So that's my preferred survey tool of choice. I don't use many of the other features though. I didn't realize that was an Indian-based company.
yeah.
Uh, I also know about ChargeBee, which is a fintech platform that a lot of companies use for subscription payments and packaging and stuff like that. So that's really exciting. And I'm glad that you're earning the respect of your peers back home, as you
Yeah,
should.
it's a wild place.
Cool. So, next one is Age of the Tech CEO Hero will come to an end. So, this is like the illusion that tech companies will save us, saying that that has been shattered.
I'm gonna go for yay, but not for my own sake, but for what values I feel it reflects, especially in the United States. Do I think strong leadership along tech is important? Yes. Do I think everybody needs to be a hero? No.
Right. Okay. I like that. I kind of want to push on this one a little more. Awesome. You were on Forbes 30 Under 30 in 2021 for Orai. It was an AI driven speech coaching app. Um, there have been a handful or two of other founders on that list that have been revealed as frauds or are accused of fraud. So much so that The Guardian published an article titled 30 Under 30-Year Sentences: Why So Many of Forbes' Young Heroes Face Jail. I guess what does it feel like? Because 30 under 30 is definitely an accolade, but like then to have these people that have soured that.
I would say that it's like being part of any community. I could say that about being Indian. I
Right.
could say that about any of the identities I embody right now. Um, uh, there are bad apples, and I hate that they exist,
Right.
genuinely. And I'm aghast at the fact that they exist. But who is to be held responsible for somebody's morally corrupt behavior? You can't tell everything. The government found out later as well. So I
Right.
would say that yeah, it hurts to see this. Not that I knew any of them,
Right.
but uh, you know, people now have a negative connotation along those lines.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. But
so
it's not like being on the list is the reason they are a fraud, right? And like the Forbes list got defrauded just as much as everyone else did, right? You know,
right.
the people that select you honestly believe that you are doing something amazing as you are, and so they're being defrauded as well. So it's not like being selected on the list is an indicator that you will also have this bad.
It's a very narrow criteria, and people look at you from a particular lens. It's a media list, and you go in with your accolades, not your whole self.
Right.
So that's also how I look at Forbes. I have a little tiny tidbit about how and when I got into that. That makes me have a bittersweet taste about Forbes, which I'll
Hmm.
get to as well.
Yeah. Oh, you're going to share that with us?
Huh?
Okay. I'll save that for our next segment, which we might as well just go into right now because that was a nice transition. So
Sure thing.
this brings us to our next segment. Fans of Make Sense have heard it several times, if not more. Who needs a safety net? In this segment, I ask my guests to share the risks, failures, nay, learning lessons, right? We learn that failures are learning lessons. We're both in Philadelphia, so Jalen Hurts says you either win or you learn. There is no failure. I love that. So we share the risks and learning lessons of entrepreneurship and creating our own paths into the future. So awesome. When you and I first spoke, you introduced yourself by saying your next invention is to be a 20 something, which resonated with me because I did 4 years in engineering school and then 2 years in grad school. And then I went straight to work, paying off my student loans, being an adult, and around 26. How old are you?
I'm 25.
So we're around the same age. I was like, can I have some fun? Right? Bought an around the world trip ticket, backpacked for 6.5 months, including going to India. But
Nice.
you know, I love that your next invention is to be a 20 something. So tell us, about a formative experience and your experience that has gotten you to this moment.
Okay, so I was an entrepreneur for 7 years, which basically meant that it started when I came to Drexel to study entrepreneurship of all the things as a college degree.
Hmm.
Very questionable decision by many, but I thought it would pay off, and it kind of sort of did. Um, but me, rather the animal I was when I was in high school, was
Hmm.
very different from me now. Let's just summarize it by saying that I only knew two things: how to DJ and how to cycle. That was my identity.
Like bicycle?
Yeah, I used to be a long distance cycling athlete.
Okay. All right. So you knew how to DJ and you knew how to cycle. Very cool.
But the moment I came to the States, I couldn't DJ because of visa restrictions on getting paid. And I couldn't cycle because I had a pretty bad back injury.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So kind of lost there. So this is 2016. I came here. I've been speaking English most of my life. Not all of my life that I've been conscious of. But coming here was a whole different culture shock. I was not really able to express myself with the confidence that I wanted to. So I tried books, I tried online courses, I tried Toastmasters, and finally, along the way, I was able to get a speech coach who was a friend to help me out with things. And that really was the only thing that worked, and that was really where the spark of where I came from. Now let me backtrack a little bit about Orion and of itself. I was a failing extrovert when I was here. It was torture, but I was always open to go out and try something. Speaking of failing and being a failing extrovert, my solution to not feeling isolated was trying to pledge a frat.
Hmm.
That didn't work out very well.
Okay. All right.
But second time around, my solution was to listen to my assistant dean here at the close school and go to this workshop on how to pitch to venture capitalists. I failed to pitch to venture capitalists there as well.
So have
Absolutely,
I.
absolutely terrible. I was pitching something about music, which I'd come up the last night, and they destroyed me. But there, I found these two people who were working on an AI powered speech coaching app. And I was like, wow, this is the solution to all my problems. I wish I had thought of that. I want to work with them. So I went ahead and I asked them, hey, how can I help? They wanted somebody who knew AI. I did not know AI, barely knew how to code at that point of time. So I said, can I come back to you in like 3 months after I've learned AI? They humored me and they said, sure. Um, I went, took an online course that kind of sort of made me think that I'd learned AI and mustered up the guts to go and say, can I have an internship
Mhm.
with these two founders? And they gave me an internship, albeit not working on AI at all, but they just needed hands on deck. And I worked hard. I really, really worked hard. I was often found, and I'm actually sitting in the space where everything started.
Mhm.
I was often found sleeping on my desk because I was just so motivated to solve this problem. And we, or I was just exploding. It went from zero to 100,000 users within a few months. It
Wow.
was an insane growth trajectory. I was so enthusiastic and I wanted to be part of it by any means. So I kept chugging along. I took online courses. I started, talking to the founders about how they could be doing things better. I got all my resources, talked to my dad. I was like, Dad, I need help. These guys are doing this. I need some smart ideas. At that
Mhm.
point of time, I didn't really know what to say. And these ideas kind of got through eventually. They started taking me more seriously. I still can't believe that they did, but hey, it worked out. And eventually I became the product manager for them.
Mhm.
Things chugged along even further. 2018 came along. We got into Techstars. We bootstrapped $80,000 from just venture capital pitching competitions for student business plan competitions
Right.
and the like. And we were on an upward trajectory, reached close to 200,000 users. It was an insane growth trajectory. I was blown away. And what was crazier for me personally was that while I was learning AI and now managing people and helping with hiring, out of the blue in the beginning of Techstars, my co-founder said, "Hey, we want you to be a founder. You're basically doing everything already. Just come on board."
Wow.
And I got equity, I got a board seat, and I got a paycheck because I was a student and got to do co-op. So
Mhm.
I was just baffled. I was baffled by the fact that I when I sat down nearly 2 years ago, then daydreaming about something like this, and I was able to achieve that.
That's amazing.
And that's the up. Now, there's also a down of that story. 2018 ended on a bang. We raised $2.3 million. We were doing great. We had IBM, Comcast, Intel, HPE, all these crazy deals going on. But for me, that just meant that they could probably hire somebody to do exactly what I did.
Mm-hmm. So you started to feel a little insecure about your contributions?
Little was an understatement. I didn't really have anything to do, to be very honest. I was doing HR and I was doing sales, and I sucked at sales,
Okay.
to be honest.
So you didn't feel like you were doing a good job anymore for this stage of the company, and that's normal.
Yeah,
Okay, tell us more.
not at all. And I moved around for a bit. I struggled through that. I already was working very hard to the point that my health was slipping. I started getting gray hairs at 21.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Gray hair
and
at 21. I'm almost 40 and I don't have any gray hairs, thank God.
so yeah, people were thinking I was in my 30s when I was barely entering my 20s, and it was
Yeah,
not.
wow.
It was not fun. So I decided to kind of take an approach wherein I decided I need a sense of security, and that came in two halves. First, I decided to go not just to get the job done, but to start becoming an expert in something. I realized that as much as having range and as much as having these wide variety of skills is extremely important to getting the job done. Getting the job done with expertise is what's really going to take me anywhere, because I am at that point of time, 2021 something. I need to have expertise. I need to have defensibility for the future. I
Mhm.
need to grow beyond the I make good decisions mindset. I need to get those hard skills. So I started working on developing hard skills in terms of AI. One of the things which I can say is like, I started reading a research paper a day, and I've done that till date. I've read more than 1,000 research papers
Wow.
just by starting atomically, starting with just the simplest thing, just read the abstract, and now I can just go through papers like easy. And eventually, that started paying off. I also disconnected my identity from the startup quite a lot. I decided that I need to focus on my health. I got into exercising again, got into gaming again. uh,
Mhm.
Started socializing, reading books. Tried to get to like 100 books that year.
So did you stop being a co-founder? Did you step down? Did you like
I I realized that I was struggling against the grain. I was working hard. I was doing everything. I was trying to figure out things to do. I was cold calling people and everything, but that was inefficient. That was not the best use of my skills. So I continued being a co-founder. I just decided that my skills are better applied somewhere else. And what that ended up being was me being put sole charge of the consumer app
Mhm.
as a result of all this work, which I was showing that I eventually found my direction. I was like, listen, this is enterprise strategy is going great, but this is not my cup of tea. I can't go into a boardroom and sell to these people. I'm a product guy.
It's funny that that was your responsibility when this whole thing started because you were, what did you say, a failing extrovert. Like you didn't even want to speak very much because I imagine you were insecure about your accent when you came here. And so you joined this company that has this mission of helping people like yourself. And then you're given the role of going into these big enterprise pitch meetings. And you're like, wait.
Fire. I did learn a lot, but I was nowhere close to what the company needed.
Yeah, I don't, yeah, of course, I get it. So, um, I want you to finish before I jump in. I have some questions.
So then 2020 happened. To put it bluntly, 2020 was rough. It was rough on all of us, but it was very rough on Orai. First and foremost, our revenues went from close to $1 million ARR to zero on the
Wow.
enterprise strategy. That led us to have to pivot away from that on Orai, which led to a lot of co founder fighting. A lot of existing issues came back up. A lot of pain emerged, and the three of us, unfortunately, were doing three things in the same company, which I don't even have words as to how terrible that
Hmm.
is. I continued managing the consumer app. My CEO decided to do his own thing, and my CTO decided to do his own thing. The board was fine with it. They were like, "We need to get the money right now because the world is turning upside down."
So your board encouraged you to what, find and acquire?
My goal was get the app acquisition ready. I was totally ready to exit, and I was burnt out
Yeah.
beyond belief.
Okay.
We raised revenues from 1,000 MRR to 20K MRR over the course of an year, but that still wasn't enough. And so everybody kind of in the team, besides myself, was like, we should put it on autopilot and let it go.
Mm.
At that point in time, I was kind of done. It was mid-pandemic. I was burnt out. I was pretty much hands off. My personal life fell apart, to say the least. I had a partner for 5 years. No longer have a partner for 5 years. After that, it
Mhm.
was really intense. I decided to go back home to India. And honestly, all I did from November till say Feb was sit and play Destiny 2 for about 1,500 hours or something like that. Got really good at the game. In the meanwhile, what ended up happening was we had my co-founder and CEO leave the company because he was no longer part of the vision. We decided to go with what my CTO and co-founder Paratosh was working on, which was CopyCat. Now,
Mhm.
and what I've been working for the past 2 odd years now. And what CopyCat was essentially a tool to take your designs in the software called Figma and convert it directly to code, which you could put initially on your on mobiles and on web, which
Mhm.
essentially took something that could take 4 to 8 hours for a coder to do and brought it down to close to 30 seconds,
Mhm.
which was something which we faced in Orai as a problem that we were doing the same thing in four different languages.
Was CopyCat doing just the front end or the entire experience?
Just the front end.
Okay. Yeah.
This
Okay. Got it.
this just as GPT-3 was getting like its early
Mhm.
public, no, sorry, private betas
Yeah.
even. So we were like very inspired by that. I was still, well, not really into the direction of the company because initially the idea was doing it without AI, and I was just like, I want to do it with AI.
Mhm.
And the funny thing is, the week before we had the board meeting to take this direction between what my CEO wanted to do and CopyCat, we got into Forbes
Wow.
for Orai.
Isn't that just like such a weird thing that life sends you? You're like you're getting recognized for something that you've almost already emotionally like disattached from.
Yeah, it was very strange. I thought my friends were playing a prank on me when I got the email.
Wow. Wow. Did you take that as a sign that Orai was worth revisiting, or did you just take it and keep going?
I I think that there are people out there who are doing what Orai is doing and accomplishing their mission. I have had initial conversations with a few founders who have done it. I've been as much help as I can. But for me, I think it's baggage. I don't want to carry that onwards because what Orai was as an emotional experience is something I want to move beyond. And that's something I'd already got into. Did I believe that Orai had great potential? Of course, I believed in that since day one.
Yeah.
But that won't change till my deathbed. But it was not the potential I was meant to unlock. And I'm okay with that. It took a
Yeah.
while, but I'm okay with that.
But it's one part of your journey, and you're so young. You have so much time. Believe me, older people still tell me I'm so young. I have so much time, which I believe. So you should definitely believe. There's a few things I wrote down from your story that I kind of
Huh.
want to like highlight. So first and foremost, um, your kind of consistent like appetite for learning new things is so important. There's a saying, leaders are learners, right? And that we should always be learning. And I think sometimes, particularly with that headline, like Age of the Tech CEO Hero comes to an end, is that there's this idea in the startup world that you need to be this hero, and that then founders' egos get in the way of actually be learning, and you actually get so much better when you're learning instead of a place where you think that you need to be a hero, right? And so I thought that's a really great part of your story, and you should definitely keep up with that. I think there were things I liked, the failing extrovert. That was a great saying. You have a great way with words and phrases. I think the whole like
Thank you.
your next invention is to be a 20 something, like that's a very cool way of saying things. Um Pitching VCs in college, I have a great story. It's on one of my YouTube videos. I went up and like, in front of VCs in like 2006, and I just like tried to squish as many words into a 30-second pitch as possible instead of focusing on what's captivating. So I'm sure you learned how to do better while you were at Techstars.
Oh, yeah.
I also, what I appreciate about your story is that for sure your story of building Orai, like you're the sounds like the stereotypical young kid giving everything into this startup because you don't have a family, you don't have bills, and you can just go for it. But there's really an unglamorous side to all of this. And I think it's extraordinary that you were able to see that it was becoming a part of your identity that like wasn't good, because you were so burnt out. And burnt out is also a synonym for depressed, and when you're depressed you stop caring about the things that you're excited about you know and so you're definitely feeling that. And for sure, a lot of us have been there. I always say, as an entrepreneur, the quickest way to learn about yourself is through entrepreneurship, because every step of the way you have to do something that scares you, and it's always just the next thing is just on the edge of discomfort. And it's very easy to turn around and say, no, I'm not going to do that, I'm too scared. But if entrepreneurship requires you to step up and face your fears, and you learn a lot about yourself. So I imagine you're wise beyond your years right now.
People have been calling me an old man since I was 16, but that's just because I crib a lot.
Yeah. So, um, and then I think what's really great, that you were able to find the next thing that you wanted to work on. Um, are you still working on CopyCat or no?
So, just like things go, CopyCat winded down. But
Hmm.
this time, me and my co founder learned to do it the right way. Don't burn it to the ground.
Hmm.
I mean, what ended up happening is pretty simple. First, we were working very well. We had gotten 20,000 users.
Hmm.
It was great. Some enterprise pilots happening along the way. All great. Fundraising is going. But then one hit after another. Two of our competitors raised more than 5 million. We had an existing cap table that was hindering our fundraise. Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. GPT-4 happened and showed a demo that looked quite close to us, freaking investors out. Me and my co founders were getting really bad deals.
Hmm.
we started getting burnt out over the course of this fundraise, we realized we could keep doing this out of sheer stubbornness, or we could go see if we can join somebody who's doing this better.
Mm-hmm.
We thought about joining our competitors for a bit. We were like, listen, you can take our IP, acquihire us. We realized that our competitors didn't have the vision at the same level. So we decided, let's just get to our next phase in life.
Yeah.
My founder's chilling in India. I'm
Mm-hmm.
still in the States. I'm figuring out my next move. And just like I said, being a 20 something is important to me now. I do want to get back into the startup world, but I also feel like there is room for specialization in being me.
Yeah, I really love that. I will kind of cap your story by saying something that someone said to me that helped me uh, along my journey, which is once you're an entrepreneur, or if you're an entrepreneur, you will create multiple businesses in your lifetime. And the person said that to me because I was putting too much pressure on what that first thing needed to be, and it helped me to just simplify and be like, oh, I can start an e-commerce business, like that's easy, right? So yeah, I think the fact that you have a skill in looking for opportunity, and seeing where things can be improved. And my grandfather also said to both my sister and I that you have to be a specialist because then people really need you, and that's great. I think you're going into this next phase with big open eyes, and that's awesome for you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I really appreciate it.
Of course, if my life can help other people through my failures and my successes, that's the best thing.
Yeah,
Um,
of course. That's awesome. You might be a coach and consultant in the future. So, let's get to GPT-4, talking about the AI's evolution. This next segment, how did we get here and where can we go now? So technology can move super fast, and the news likes to tout all the investments and the future possibilities and scare the shit out of some people that think they're going to lose their jobs. But sometimes it's actually really far from reality. So in this segment, we are going to talk about a trend, a headline, to talk through. And Asim, you said something to me super interesting. You said GPT-4 is worse than previous versions. So let's start with the basics. I'm going to add, because makes sense. We want to make it simple for people. What is GPT-4?
let's not go with the full form. Let's start with the fact that GPT-4, when explained simply, is a technology
Mm-hmm.
that looks at a set of words, then because it has looked at so many words in that similar fashion,
Mm-hmm.
says if this string of words comes together in this way, the corresponding string of set of words after that should be this.
Got it.
Just like when you're asking me a question, I think what I should do, but there's no logic involved. It's all probability.
Got it. So when we talk a lot on Make Sense about ChatGPT, which is a specific interface for interacting with GPT, and GPT-4 is version 4. And for those of you listening audio, I just put in quotes 4 because there was version like 3.5 and stuff like that. So when you're interfacing with OpenAI's ChatGPT interface, it is leveraging, I think now, GPT-4. Maybe in the past it was 3.5. So when did 4 come out?
So they use both. Four for the premium tier. Four came out about 4, maybe 5 months ago. Uh,
Okay.
it's a much more recent development, and they've been working on many things which should be better with four. They are very tight-lipped about it, but the demo showed the fact that it can understand visually how to construct things. It was supposed to be better at various tasks, and that's OpenAI's PR.
Is GPT closed source?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
GPT is that's the name of the architecture.
Okay.
OpenAI has co-opted that term to mean their branded AI model, and it's actually just a way of training AI. So
Okay.
when
It's two things. It's two things.
it's two things, but it's like now everybody's like,
Got it. It's
yeah,
like Kleenex.
yeah,
Kleenex has
pretty.
become the name for tissues. Okay, cool. All right. So what have different communities been saying about GPT-4?
Simply put, people think it's getting worse. Is that true? Probably, but not in the way most people might think. So first and foremost, what does worse really mean for
Yeah.
GPT-4? There is one side of the Twitterverse, oh sorry, Xverse, I guess now, uh, that is saying
For you listening, I just rolled my eyes. Sorry. I need to make sure the facial expressions are shared with all of our audience. Okay. Okay.
uh,
So X verse was here.
Xverse thing. That's so weird to say, but um, it's because you're using it so much more because it's so much better that you're seeing so many more errors. I would have agreed with that hypothesis because that is something that I saw in my entrepreneurial journey. When usage went up, bug reports went up. For
Right, of course.
But there's more recent research which has been showing that, and this is close to anecdotal based on the way I read the paper. They haven't discussed the
It's it's more anecdotal. It hasn't been like quantitatively proven to be worse in any way.
I didn't find it compelling personally, but that's up to but
Wait,
that's up
wait,
to
but
debate.
you've read like 1,000 academic papers, so you didn't find this academic paper compelling?
It, I found it. I found the representation a little cherry picking. I
Okay,
would love to see a little bit more of a holistic, explorable thing, and
okay,
that might just be me who's not really gone in there and done the digging. But it had questions like, can GPT-4 or GPT-3 tell this is a prime number? And for all intents and purposes, that's not what the system's built to do.
right. Okay. So there is an academic paper, but it seems anecdotal, and everything else on the internet and all the forums is anecdotal too. But you still said probably it's
Yes.
getting worse. So tell us why you think probably it's getting worse.
Now, while these may seem anecdotal, we can also look at the larger trend of what OpenAI is really looking at. OpenAI wants to make their models safer, more responsible, more consumer worthy, more enterprise worthy. It's a product at the end of the day. So, what I have seen in personal experience, as well as what is probably resulting in these stranger or less accurate results, is what OpenAI is doing to restrict the model in the way it can output things. To give you a funny example, about March, I could probably ask what a swear word in Hindi meant on GPT-3 and GPT 3.5. If I do the same thing now, it can't do that because it says I only encourage healthy language.
Mhm.
Now, so they are putting guardrails around it. The fortunate or unfortunate thing with guardrails when you do work with AI is that you don't know exactly what kind of roll off or cascade effects they have. After all, this is statistics and this is probability, not straight logic. So these things are trained on billions and billions and billions of example, and you're now saying use this one rule across the board. How does that one rule modify those billions and billions of examples? Does it interfere? We don't even understand how it thinks. So there's no visibility into the brain of GPT-4 at all.
So this is like you're saying there's a lot of conversation, uh, even conversation that's made it to the U.S. Congress about ethics and compliance. I've talked about it on Make Sense. I use the example from L.A. Glassford's interview where if you go into a generative image generator, AI driven, and put in uh, a menopausal woman in her 40s, they'll spit out someone that looks like in her 80s breathing fire. Or with Kat Hoffman talking about the LGBTQ plus community, if you enter in like a gay couple, every single picture has a rainbow in it. So we want the tools to be less reductive,
Right.
right? We want the tools. So what you're saying is like OpenAI is starting to put a few guardrails in place that would hopefully get us to a less reductive experience, but we're seeing these unexpected cascading
Correct.
effects of putting guardrails in place, and they may be negative, causing negative user experiences for actual real applications and
Yeah.
questions.
To give it a very simple example, I always like to say that think of these GPT-3, GPT-4 models like a kid. It's just a child who has learned echolocalia, which is essentially learning to mimic the words, probably not really understanding what
Right.
they mean. And that's really what you would think of GPT-4 as, but at an extremely massive scale. So if you tell a child to not say a particular word because
Mhm.
it's a bad word, but they don't really understand that it's a bad word, or they don't understand the concept of bad, or these ethical constraints and logic really isn't formed, you're just saying bad, no. The child might not say other things as well because they're like not sure. And so what ends up happening, and this is actually even seen when the magic behind GPT-3 and 4 comes from this technique called reinforcement learning with human feedback. Fancy words to basically say that we take an AI model and make it spit out a bunch of text, and then we take another AI model which grades that same text.
Mm.
The other AI model, however, is trained to grade text based on what humans think is good or not good. So, what we're trying to do is teach another AI model our way of doing things, and that other AI model then trains this bigger AI model on our way of doing things. So,
Mhm.
it's kind of, as you said, it's the technique, and the literal way of thinking about it is distilling. And when we distill things, we enhance the properties, just like we would think about alcohol. You enhance the properties of something, and therefore these biases you're seeing, we are trying to remove, we literally bring that information into a smaller format.
Mhm.
And that is when we lose nuance. That loss of nuance is fundamental, both on a mathematical level but also on an ethical level, that we need to think about systems which understand where nuance matters and where nuance doesn't matter. And that's not how now this thing is built right now. People are working on it, on other stuff, but that's not how the core architecture is built. Albeit it's closed source, I don't know. OpenAI, don't come at me.
Yeah. So, wait, so here's a question for our audience. I can tell for me, I can go with you in this direction, but I find that examples sometimes help. And uh,
Sure.
I know a lot of developers use GPT-4 to help write code. From what I understand, GPT-4 is holding up in that realm, but in other realms, maybe one of the first episodes of Make Sense, I talked with a product marketer, Ariel Schneidman, and she said, ChatGPT was her robot thought partner, and that it was starting to get kind of silly in product positioning statements, value propositions, like the stuff that you might be doing, like creative brainstorming in the chat interface. So, could you give us some other examples or what you've seen trend wise where the experience is starting to deprecate?
uh, I think a lot of students use it for their homework. So that's definitely a few friends of mine who are still in
So
school.
asking it to write for you.
Asking it to write for you, I personally have found that it has gotten much worse at summarizing things.
You know what? That's something that I read is that so the summaries are just spitting back a lot of the same sentences that you gave it, and it's struggling. I've noticed because one of the use cases I use it for we want our emails to be really concise. It
Right.
takes time to write a short message. So I will write out my long message, I will put it in ChatGPT, and I will ask it to cut it in half. And it is struggling, even when I say, can you make this shorter? I said, can you cut it in half? And it actually uh, gave me the first three sentences and then said, this is the midpoint, and then printed out the exact same the next three sentences. So it just broke up my paragraph into two paragraphs. So I
Right.
have to, can you make this use 50% less words? Right.
Right.
So I'm having to get a lot more specific about what I want it to do.
And it could be, so one of the reasons I'd said was that they're putting on more guardrails, but it also could be the way OpenAI is using its data. Did you know that we're going to run out of data, to viable data to use for training these big language models next year?
Yeah, I've heard stuff like that, and at the same time, they're facing these copyright
Yep.
issues. Like, where are they getting this data? I thought maybe GPT-4 was getting worse because of all the new people that are interacting with ChatGPT and talking to it. I remember several years ago, it might have been pre-pandemic, Microsoft put out an AI bot on Twitter, and within like 4 hours, it was like a racist,
Yep.
misogynistic
Yep.
asshole because people on Twitter just talked to it like that and fed it that garbage. So now you have ChatGPT, which I've been encouraging people all year to go in and experiment with, but the average person, the average person is the average person. I mean, they say like the average person reads at a fifth grade level. So like we're putting a lot of that into OpenAI's model, right?
Probably, again, we can only guess at this point of time. I do know that it's a bad idea because the reason AI works, and this is right off of OpenAI's blog, is because good data results in better models. They have a whole blog post on this, and if they're not sticking to that,
Well, we
that's what they
talk about garbage in, garbage out on the
exactly.
right? It's a saying as old as a database: garbage in, garbage out. I had someone say, "Oh, it's not the experience isn't deprecating; it's just an issue of prompting." So, is it like I said, you just have to get more specific about prompting it, or you think it's still um, that really isn't it at the end of the day?
I'm a very user centric guy. I'm like, if the user is unhappy with whatever way they're speaking into it and not getting what they want, it's worse. I think it's a consumer centric product, ChatGPT at least. So asking users to get good isn't viable.
Spoken like a great product manager with a really good focus on user experience. I took my first ergonomics and UX course in 2002, so take that as a huge compliment. That technology should be designed for people. And now we've seen a lot of places where we have adjusted our lives for technology, right? Like people now understand that they have to say, "Hey, Alexa," and they have to say to Alexa very specific commands to get what they want. But the more technical you have to be at those prompts, the more annoying it is. Um, in a good way, it's like, well, the robots can't take over too soon. But that brings me to my next question, which is this recent discovery that OpenAI can't detect the difference between human writing and AI writing. So, what is that about? And do we need that? Do we
Yeah,
need?
I mean, it makes sense. You're using human writing to create writing again. The high like it's complicated, but essentially, I think, and to put it simply, you are trying to do something like identify whether something is photoshopped or not.
Mm-hmm.
By initially, it used to be that Photoshop used to be really mid, and people were not really able to make such good Photoshops. Now Photoshop's gotten better. You can't tell if things are photoshopped anymore. Same phenomenon here, wherein the technology just got better.
Hmm.
And why it got better was very simply because we developed techniques to make it more and more aligned with human expectations.
Right.
Of course you can't detect it. Nothing will work because your first goal was to make it good enough, and the second goal is now to roll it backwards.
Why would we want to be able to tell the difference between the two?
I think the one angle I see is trust in from an institutional perspective, but be it academia or be it just the news. You, I feel like there's a fundamental thing which is happening, and as a macro trend here is that our lives as people are going from being about producing and being part of the capital, um, and being the capital in and of itself in a capitalistic system, to being the enablers of capital all over again. And
Hmm.
that is a slightly uncomfortable shift, which is to say that the humanness, our humanness, is what matters all over again. The fact that your content is produced by you, a human, and I trust you, a human, you look like me, you talk like me, you're not a piece of code on a server, that is what's starting to matter all over again. That authenticity, as a whole, the world is just craving that in so many arenas. And that is really something that just makes sense to me,
Hmm.
because people do things for people, people feel things for people,
Hmm.
people can only feel things so far for that which is not like them,
Right.
and that's just human nature.
Yeah, I remember once back in 2016, the idea of a robot writing a book. A friend of mine was getting his master's in computer science at Penn, and he said, it was his friend's right to figure out how to put together an AI model that could write an entire book on its own. And that triggered a bunch of different ethical concerns. you know Book publishers, just like we're seeing in the movie industry, entertainment industry, like given the opportunity, would employ robots over actually paying authors. But so many generations of only new books coming out from robots, and like
Right.
robots eating the robot in terms of the AI content. Like, at what point do our brains like the humanness of our writing style and creativity and the human experience just get programmed out of those quote unquote
Right.
robots? I think that's kind of like what you're talking about too, is the authenticity and the humanness. And I assure definitely the trust of where this information is coming from. And that's part of the copyright issues, is that the way that AI models get trained, you can't possibly say, here are the top 10 sources that we drew this answer from, right?
So funny thing you mentioned that. That's exactly what Google's Bard is trying to make sure happens.
Google wants to be able to say, here's our answer, and we're drawing it. The top 10 contributors of maybe 100,000 articles were these.
Possibly there are systems which are even more specific than that.
Okay.
There there are systems in development. I don't remember this precisely. It's probably Stanford's AI lab or Berkeley's AI lab, one of the uh, uh, two AI labs, which published a paper about a large language model that's actually able to pull up specific citations for its
Well,
work.
that would be an improvement on things,
and
right?
and people are looking at that because it is so much like what somebody would do when looking for trust in something.
Exactly. It helps assess the quality of information. I feel like you would have really liked my master's program at Berkeley, the School of Information. I took a class called the Quality of Information. One of our homework assignments back in 2007 was to write some bullshit in a Wikipedia page and see how long it took the community to get rid of it, which was a lot longer 15 years ago than it would be today. I have just one question. Why can't GPT-4 just file version history, roll back to previous versions? Like, why can't we just go back to an older model?
Theoretically, or rather practically, yes, they probably do have the older version. But
Hmm.
it really depends on what OpenAI's priorities are. It's really about what OpenAI wants to get done.
Hmm.
And right now, they took these decisions
Hmm.
because they felt that it fulfilled some level of business goal to have these guardrails around.
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure they do go back and forth between models. A/B testing is pretty common.
Hmm.
Common for AI models. It's a very good way to note what is and is not working, especially at this scale wherein it's so hard to develop test data sets. The test is the audience, and there's dangers to that. But with something like ChatGPT, it's not terrible because they have enough disclaimers around it. So they do go back and forth. But if this continuous decline has happened, it it has to be noticed. And if it is not, well, hi OpenAI, do notice this, please.
I think I could ask you a bunch of other questions, but I like to keep these episodes under an hour. So maybe we'll have to bring you up back in a couple months. You can tell us what it's like to be a normal 20 something, but I'm sure you will never just be a normal anything. I sound like an old grandparent giving out these like huge accolades to their grandchild, but I think you're fantastic. So
Thank you, Lindsay.
let's make it make sense. GPT-4 has possibly a deprecated user experience from the guardrails that OpenAI is putting in. If you want to listen to an episode where we talk about the copyright issues OpenAI is facing, the episode with Sheena Franklin that came out August 3rd it has that conversation. We'll also have an upcoming episode with Jose Puga um, talking about, oh, I lost my train of thought. We were talking about the discussion around guardrails in AI, closed source versus open source, what's happening in U.S. Congress, and all this speculation around GPT-4 is because OpenAI's model is closed source. We really can't know exactly all of their choices in the back end and in their programming. Uh, anyway, we should always be using our brains when we're using AI. That is, that's been the one conclusion across the board is that use your brain when you're using AI. So, do you want to leave anyone with any make sense kind of summations for us?
AI is not going to take your job, it's going to make it better.
Yes.
And look forward to it and help along with it by being critical about what AI is doing. That's all I would say
Yep.
because that's the only way AI gets good.
Right, right. So thank you for listening to Make Sense with me, your host, Lindsay Tavis, and guest, Aasim Sani. We hope you enjoyed our take on GPT-4 and how AI is evolving. Aasim, where can people find you online? Do you want people to find you online?
Uh, well, that's an interesting question.
I
So,
mean, yeah, because you're on this podcast. If you do not want to be found online, then you
mm,
don't.
well, I'm on Twitter as Aasim Sani, one word, no caps, and you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm always open to talk to people about what they're doing on with their startups. Always open to help, especially students. I was a student entrepreneur. I was an international student entrepreneur. Reach out to me if you're struggling with that. You're figuring it out. I'm here. I'm always happy to answer, and that's me.
Way to embody the Techstars hashtag give first. As always, you can check out all the links and resources in the show notes. Final note, if you want to continue to be the smartest person in the room, make sure you're getting notified when each episode hits on YouTube. Hit that subscribe for next week's episode. For audio only, follow wherever you get your podcast. Thank you, Aasim, for joining me.
Thank you for having me.